I don't get it. I heard that phrase more times than I can ever begin to count when I was teaching mathematics and gave my kids a big, sexy math task to chew on. It was their tacit request for me to explain the problem and help them figure out how to go through it. And every time I did, I robbed them of the opportunity to develop these mathematical practices. I robbed them of the opportunity to think like mathematicians. So, we need to teach the practices, but how do we do it? It can seem like an overwhelming task. There are so many of them, there feels like so little time. I'm going to tell you how to do it today in about 4 minutes and 17 seconds. So the first thing you have to know is that not all math practices are equal. They play different roles in students' mathematical thinking. Like actors in a movie, some take the lead in the thinking and some support that thinking. We're going to focus on the lead actors. The first one, make sense of problems and persevere in solving it. Without something mathematically problematic to chew on, none of the other practices are in play. We need to start with a high demand task. The next step, we need to focus on math practices 2, 7, and 8. Why? Because math practices 2, 7, and 8 define 3 distinct ways of thinking mathematically. And I'm going to talk about those in a minute. They're our lead actors, and these guys that just bounced in, these are our supporting actors. These support the reasoning about quantities. These support the thinking about structure. These support the repeated reasoning. Take a look at that math task. So what I'd like to do now is talk through what those 3 avenues of thinking look like if you're tackling a little task like the fish tank. So if you are going down the math practice 2 avenue of thinking, you are paying attention to quantities. You're asking yourself, what can I count or measure in this situation? You're looking for relationships between those quantities. When you look at math work from someone who's reasoning quantitatively, they're looking behind the numbers to the quantities those numbers represent. They're looking at the relationships that are suggested between the quantities. If you look further at their mathematical work, you may notice some sort of visual diagram where they're trying to take a look at the quantities and how they're related, kick out some quantities that aren't so obvious, and suggest a solution approach. Second avenue of thinking is reasoning structurally. If you are reasoning structurally, you're trying to get a handle on how this situation is behaving. You're asking yourself, have I seen a problem like this before? How does this feel? How are things moving in this problem? You may change perspectives, shift perspectives. You may look at that 4/5 full and think, that's the same as 1/5 empty. Maybe I can leverage that idea to work my way through a solution. If you are thinking structurally, you're trying to create calculation shortcuts. You're using what you know about how numbers are put together and taken apart, and you leverage that to make calculations easier, like this student did, by thinking of 20.5 as 20 and 0.5. Third avenue of thinking, regularity and repeated reasoning. Third avenue of thinking, regularity and repeated reasoning. Third avenue of thinking, regularity and repeated reasoning. You get it. You pay attention to something that happens over and over again. And if it's not happening over and over again, make it happen. Try some numbers. Not to get the answer, but to kick out a process that's the same each time. Track your calculations, look for the regularity, and what may pop out of that is something that you can then generalize and grab onto and use to find an answer, as this student did, by thinking he multiplied whatever times 5 each time to get 20.5. So teach the 3 avenues of thinking, and students will have ways to make sense of problems. They'll know to pay attention to quantity, how things behave, repetition. Teach the 3 avenues of thinking, and students will not only have multiple ways in through problems, they'll have ways to persevere through problems. They'll have options in their problem solving. They'll develop problem solving grit. They'll get it. So teach the 3 avenues of thinking. Oh, title of this talk, when does 2 plus 7 plus 8 equal 1? When we're talking about the mathematical practices, teach those 3 avenues of thinking, and your kids will know how to make sense of problems and persevere through them.